Just before sunrise, when Philadelphia still lay under a sheet of cold gray light, the city's most powerful legal office, the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office, stood silent. The corridors were dark, the elevators still, the lobby empty except for a single security guard sipping lukewarm coffee. Outside, fog clung low over Market Street, swallowing the headlights of early commuters. It was a moment that should have meant nothing, a moment the city would forget within seconds. But this would be the morning Philadelphia would remember for decades. At 5:48 a.m., an unmarked federal convoy rolled to a controlled stop along the curb. Doors opened in perfect sequence. Black boots hit the pavement. No sirens, no shouting, only quiet, deliberate motion. Agents moved with the precision of people who had rehearsed every step, every angle, every breath. They didn't enter through the front doors like visitors. They moved with the certainty of people entering a place already lost. The first gesture was simple. A gloved fist raised once, then lowered. The building's glass doors opened under keycard override. 5 seconds later, the quiet wasn't quiet anymore. Federal Bureau of Investigation tactical units swept through the lobby in black silhouettes. DEA strike teams followed behind them, forming a silent wave of helmets, gloves, and armored vests. The security guard froze mid-sip, the cardboard cup trembling in his hand. He didn't even manage a question before an agent calmly directed him to step aside. There was no need for conflict. The operation had already moved past the point of interruption. Every hallway swallowed the sound of synchronized footfalls. No chaos, no confusion, only certainty. The certainty of what awaited behind a particular office door on the 12th floor. The door with a name that had commanded respect across the state for years. Marcus A. Hale, District Attorney, City and County of Philadelphia. A man who had stood before cameras preaching integrity, accountability, reform. A man who had promised to clean the streets, to dismantle trafficking networks, to restore trust in the city's broken judicial systems. A man whose signature had appeared on thousands of felony indictments. And now, a man behind that office door, the epicenter of a betrayal no one had been willing to imagine. The breach team reached the 12th floor without resistance. Every fluorescent light was still off, rows of cubicles faintly illuminated only by the soft glow of streetlight leaking through narrow windows. The team moved between desks like a shadow drifting through an abandoned battlefield. One step, then another, the air thick with the kind of tension that presses against the ribs. The lead agent paused at the DA's office door. Another raised gesture. A hydraulic ram swung forward. The strike hit the metal frame with a crack so sharp it seemed to split the morning in half. The door buckled inward. On the second hit, it shattered open with a metallic scream. Inside, the room looked flawless. Painfully, insultingly flawless. A perfectly polished desk. Family photographs arranged with care. Legal books aligned by height. A half-finished cup of tea still steaming lightly. Sunlight creeping through blinds in thin, pale stripes. And in the center of the room, standing beside his desk with wrists already secured in cold steel, District Attorney Marcus Hale. His tailored suit immaculate, his expression unreadable, his posture stiff with a kind of quiet defiance. Not the defiance of innocence, but the defiance of a man who had believed his armor was untouchable. Agents entered without hesitation. Two moved to the back wall. One secured the computer. Another swept the adjoining conference room. Last came the evidence specialist, who approached Hale's desk as though approaching a crime scene preserved for museum display. What they found wasn't subtle. On the polished wood surface lay a sealed courier box marked with a routine administrative barcode, the type processed every day without question. Inside that box sat the truth hidden in plain sight. 4.6 kilograms of heroin, 2 kilograms of pure fentanyl, $58,000 in rubber-banded stacks, a 9mm pistol with the serial number shaved to bare metal, a folder labeled Deferred Evidence, Confidential. No signs of panic, no signs of a rushed staging. Everything placed with the calmness of routine, as if this box had been opened before, as if this room had been a checkpoint, not an office. Agents exchanged no words. They did not need to. The air said everything. This was not a bribe gone wrong. This was not a momentary lapse in judgment. This was not a desperate official dragged into crime by poverty or fear. This was systemic infiltration, wearing a prosecutor's badge. The kind of corruption that does not walk in through alleyways or border tunnels, but strides calmly through metal detectors and front lobbies, with a government identification card clipped to its lapel. For years, the people of Philadelphia had been told their city was under siege from outside forces, from traffickers, from smugglers, from gangs that lurked in corners of neighborhoods most officials never stepped into. But the evidence on that desk told a different story. The danger hadn't come from the street. It had come from the courthouse. It had come from the man elected to fight the very poison he was distributing. Photographs of ribbon cuttings on the wall watched silently as federal agents documented each item. Reports stacked neatly on a side table seemed to glow with irony as evidence bags clicked shut. Behind all of it, Marcus Hale stared straight ahead, his silence louder than any confession. The moment the evidence ledger snapped closed, the narrative of Philadelphia changed. This was not a scandal. This was not a headline. This was the opening fracture in a structure that had been rotting from within. Because when the person responsible for prosecuting the city's criminals becomes a central node in the criminal network, the collapse doesn't erupt like an explosion. It spreads like a disease, quietly, structurally, cell by cell. And the deeper the agents looked into Hale's office, the clearer one truth became. This story was never about drugs. It was about infiltration. And the arrest of Marcus Hale was only the beginning. The laptop sat in the center of the evidence table like a dormant weapon. Plain, matte gray, government-issued, identical to hundreds used in offices across the city. But as federal cyber analysts powered it on inside a secure room at the Philadelphia field office, they knew immediately this machine did not belong to a normal prosecutor. The boot sequence wasn't standard. The encryption didn't match district protocols. And the login interface bore security layers more common in defense contracts than municipal government. It was the kind of digital fortress built not to keep casual intruders out, but to keep law enforcement out. For hours, analysts worked in near total silence. The room buzzed with the low hum of servers. Strings of code cascaded down black screens like cold rain. Firewalls flared red, then cracked under pressure. Encryption ciphers twisted, unraveled, then collapsed. Layer after layer peeled back under forensic pressure. Municipal credentials, replaced by private encryption keys, buried beneath military-grade hybrids, reinforced by a custom shell likely written offshore. When the final lock blinked open, no one celebrated. The screen didn't reveal a private calendar or case notes. It detonated. A flood of directories filled the monitor, each one meticulously organized with the precision of a mind that understood procedure, bureaucracy, and the blind spots of institutional systems. Nothing was random, nothing mislabeled. Every file page was a thread, and every thread led downward. The first folder opened like a trap door. 23 shipment logs, 14 months of movement, all routed through official state channels. These weren't crude smuggling manifests. They were engineered to blend into the administrative bloodstream of the justice system. Courier schedules disguised as interdepartmental transfers. Evidence clerical forms repurposed as transport markers. Vehicle requisitions marked as urgent, but always on days when Hale's office conducted high-profile press conferences, ensuring attention was elsewhere. Each shipment listed quantities that froze the analysts. 8 kilograms, 14 kilograms, 20 kilograms. Always narcotics, always pure, always hidden in sealed archive containers, the same containers used for storing sensitive evidence awaiting review by prosecutors. Marcus Hale hadn't exploited the justice system. He had redesigned it. Next came the digital communications folder, the one tagged with an innocuous title. Correspondence, case items. Analysts clicked it open, expecting official emails. What emerged instead were pages of encrypted shorthand, timestamps, routing instructions, coded symbols, instantly recognizable to anyone who had studied cartel communication systems. They were not the words of a lawyer. They were the operational logs of a trafficking coordinator. One message chain stood out: short, precise, detection probability decreasing, street focus high, law enforcement distracted, expansion window stable, Philadelphia DA ensures alignment. 4 words that struck cold. DA ensures alignment. Hale wasn't covering shipments. He was validating them. Below that message was a map, not of Philadelphia streets, but of internal city systems. Mailrooms, storage facilities, official parking garages, administrative annexes, points of access only senior officials could authorize. Agents leaned closer. The DA wasn't just a participant in a criminal supply chain. He was a gatekeeper. Then came another folder, one whose name almost blended in with dozens of others. Deferred evidence, compartment B. Inside were scanned documents, case files, and logs from criminal prosecutions dating back nearly 3 years. Dozens of cases where evidence could not be located, where charges were dropped due to procedural inconsistency, where witnesses withdrew after personal emergencies. The deeper analysts scrolled, the clearer the pattern became. Hale had been selectively destroying prosecutions against mid-level traffickers belonging to a single network. Not random individuals, not fragmented groups. A single organization, Los Verdes del Norte, a cartel known for splitting its operations between U.S. civic institutions, urban distribution hubs, and rural transit pipelines. A cartel notorious for military-born leadership, quiet infiltration, and a discipline closer to insurgency movements than traditional trafficking groups. The messages in Hale's encrypted archive confirmed it. He was not just facilitating shipments, he was protecting their operatives through the legal system. Every dropped charge, every missing file, every administrative error, every lost evidence container. Each one was a brick in a structure built to shield a criminal empire. Another directory revealed photographs, grainy images taken by street-level lookouts, not of dealers, not of stash houses, of police precinct entrances, courthouse drop boxes, evidence room doors, mailroom trolleys, judicial parking lots. Notes underneath each photo included times, access codes, vulnerabilities, and rotation schedules. It wasn't surveillance of the city, it was surveillance of the justice system itself. A slow, surgical infiltration of the exact institutions designed to stop organizations like Los Verdes del Norte. And at the center of it all sat Marcus Hale, the man publicly known for anti-drug speeches, school partnerships, and tough-on-trafficking initiatives. A man celebrated by the press, a man invited to conferences, a man who had promised parents across Philadelphia that he would protect their children from poison. But the files told the truth. The poison was coming through him. When analysts reached the final folder, the room fell silent. No one spoke a word. No one shifted in their chair. The overhead lights seemed to dim, as if the moment itself understood its gravity. The folder name was simple: integration. Inside were flow diagrams, branching pathways showing how drugs, money, and influence traveled from the cartel to the courts, from the courts to the streets, from the streets back to the cartel. And at each intersection was Hale's identifier: MH7, Authority Node MH7, Judicial Override MH7, Clearance Access MH7, Institutional Gate. He hadn't been corrupted. He had been integrated. A central spine in a synthetic organism made of officials, couriers, corrupted clerks, compromised officers, and external cartel contractors. A network hiding inside legitimacy. When the final diagram loaded, a full map of Philadelphia with arterial lines glowing in red, the truth became undeniable. This wasn't a prosecutor aiding criminals. This was a criminal using the justice system as a distribution network. And the next phase wouldn't be quiet, because the deeper the agents dug, the clearer one conclusion crystallized. Philadelphia wasn't infiltrated, it was infected. and Marcus Hale was only one infected organ. The map of Philadelphia glowed across the operations wall like an X-ray of a diseased body. Arteries, nodes, hidden chambers, blind corridors. Not a map of a city, but a map of something living inside it. Something spreading. Something engineered. The red markers pulsed as if alive, blinking in quiet, steady rhythm, each one representing a location where the justice system had been quietly converted into a distribution mechanism for a cartel empire. At the center of the room, federal analysts, DEA supervisors, forensic accountants, and internal auditors stood shoulder to shoulder. None spoke, none moved. They inhaled the same chilling realization. The logistical organism that had grown under Marcus Hale's authority was far larger than one office, one corrupt prosecutor, or one chain of shipments. This was structural. This was coordinated. This was years in the making. And the deeper the investigation went, the more grotesquely elegant the design became. It started with something small, something every government building had: mailrooms. The district attorney's office mailroom processed nearly 400 parcels a day: legal filings, property returns, court notifications, couriered evidence transfers. Most were routine, most were ignored. Most passed through hands that trusted barcodes, timestamps, and stamps. Hale had turned that trust into camouflage. The first red nodes on the map marked municipal mail handlers who unknowingly processed shipments routed through sealed evidence review containers. They believed they were helping prosecutors. They believed the boxes contained sensitive case material requiring special handling. They were moving fentanyl. Next came the parking garage, 8 floors beneath the courthouse. A network of surveillance logs revealed patterns. Official vehicles checked in but not driven by their assigned operators. Keycards activated by staff who were not on shift. Hale had used the garage as a staging hub, where cartel movers disguised as city employees transferred containers into municipal SUVs bearing official decals. Then came the evidence annex, a building that should have been the safest space in the judicial system. It wasn't guarded by walls of steel. It was guarded by the assumption of integrity. That was the vulnerability Hale exploited best. Inside the annex, analysts found evidence lockers signed out with fake case numbers, boxes labeled pending disposition that contained nothing but blank paper, fireproof safes that should have held seized narcotics but were completely empty, a dozen digital logs quietly altered with time-shifted entries, and containers secretly rerouted to private storage under the guise of contamination review. All of it executed with surgical precision. Not chaos, not desperation. This was orchestration. The next red cluster on the map revealed municipal storage depots, nondescript brick buildings scattered through the city's industrial zones. Officially, they housed city repair materials, emergency supplies, winter equipment. But under Hale's watch, they were leased to private contractors whose names did not appear on any public registry. When agents entered the first depot with a warrant, they found rows of city-stamped crates containing counterfeit medication bottles filled with pressed methamphetamine, vitamin supplement packages hiding fentanyl sticks, saline boxes concealing bricks of heroin, syringes repurposed into micro-containers for powdered narcotics, and cold storage units masking bundles of cocaine marked with coded symbols. The infiltration had evolved past smuggling. It had become industrial mimicry. Every item, every container, every label mirrored legitimate government supply lines. The cartel didn't hide under darkness. It hid behind bureaucracy, paperwork, and routine. The next nodes blinked along the city's north-south axis, vehicle depots where city maintenance vans were serviced. Under Hale's authority, evidence transport vans were occasionally scheduled for priority route clearance. No one questioned why those vans, assigned only to the DA's office, traveled through the city at odd hours. Inside their maintenance logs, one anomaly repeated. Mileage increases without official assignments. Fuel consumption not matching documented routes. GPS logs corrupted in exact 10-minute intervals. The The vans had been the arteries. The drugs had been the blood. Across the river, another red cluster spread across warehouse districts in South Philadelphia. Areas long known for heavy freight, but now repurposed by a new kind of trafficker. Hale had approved dozens of temporary evidence overflow storage permits for buildings that did not house evidence at all. They housed pallets of disguised narcotics, destined for neighborhoods, clinics, clubs, and suburban distribution points. Each warehouse operated behind a veneer of legitimacy. Tax records clean, inspections passed, leases paid on time by shell organizations. Then analysts reached the sector marked in deep crimson, the most disturbing discovery of all: youth outreach centers. 9 separate nonprofits received generous funding from Hale's Community Renewal Initiative. They offered after-school programs, mentorship events, tutoring. They posted photos of smiling children, community barbecues, leadership workshops. But inside their storage rooms, federal agents found empty boxes used as cutout fronts, donation trucks quietly rerouted to private unload sites, cash envelopes disguised as program budgets, and ledgers filled with coded initials and unexplained 4-digit figures. They weren't helping children. They were disguising distribution. And each of the 9 nonprofits traced back, through a chain of shell entities, to a single account created 3 years earlier, an account that Hale himself had approved under a discretionary funds clause. A clause meant to serve the vulnerable had become a shield for the predatory. But the infection didn't stop with buildings. The next part of the map wasn't geographic. It was institutional. Red nodes appeared in the clerk's office, the sheriff's department, the judicial courier service, the evidence management unit, the municipal contracting board, the public defender's administrative wing, and even the city's Department of Public Health. Not all were corrupted, not all were aware, but enough were compromised to create a chain, a silent logistical machine pumping narcotics through a system designed to protect the public from exactly this kind of threat. Hale had built a network that didn't operate beside the justice system. It operated inside it, like a parasite rewiring the host. One analyst stepped back from the glowing map and exhaled. The infection was not scattered. It was not chaotic. It was centralized, structured, hierarchical, like veins feeding a single heart. And at the center of every major artery was one designation: MH7, Marcus Hale, the keystone, the stabilizer, the architect. Without him, the network trembled. With him, it thrived. The question no longer was how much had been infected. The question was how much of Philadelphia's justice system remained untouched. Because what the map revealed wasn't infiltration. It wasn't corruption. It was co-option, an institutional takeover disguised as routine civic life. And now that the skeleton of the organism was exposed, one truth became undeniable. To destroy this network, the federal response could no longer be subtle. The next phase would not be analysis. It would be rupture. At 3:42 in the morning, long before the first delivery trucks rolled through the damp streets of South Philadelphia, the federal command post across the river hummed like the nerve center of a coming storm. The operations floor was lit only by the glow of screens, maps, blueprints, thermal feeds, encrypted radio channels. Every monitor displayed a different artery of the network built under Marcus Hale's authority. Every red node was a target. Every blinking icon was a threat. There would be no subpoenas, no quiet arrests, no slow unraveling of bureaucracy. This phase would be violent. This phase would be loud. This phase would be the shock the city had never expected to feel from its own institutions. At 4:01, the final operational directive flashed on the wall in stark white letters. Action. All units. 14 targets. 14 minutes. The message vanished as quickly as it appeared. Then the city woke up to the sound of its own corruption being torn open. The first strike fell on a warehouse in Port Richmond, a building marked publicly as a municipal record staging facility, a place that had never stored a single government record, a place that had been quietly repurposed into a cold storage narcotics vault under Hale's oversight. The raid team stacked at the side entrance, forming a column of helmets, vests, and controlled breathing. The charge detonated with a pulse of white light. The metal door folded inward like softened plastic. The shock wave ripped through the alley, rattling dumpsters and shaking frost from a chain-link fence. Inside, the darkness flickered with muzzle flashes as suspects dove for concealed weapons. But the firefight ended before it began. Stun grenades erupted in thunderous pulses. Light swallowed the shadows. Within seconds, 3 men lay face down on the concrete floor, their hands zip-tied, their guns kicked away by boot heels. Agents swept forward, passing shelf after shelf of crates disguised as city inventory. The labels claimed medical supplies, winter equipment, water filtration units, maintenance kits. Inside the crates, wrapped in commercial shrink seal, fentanyl bricks lined in rows, heroin pressed into commercial labeled tubs, methamphetamine pills stamped like prescription stimulants, cocaine bricks marked with symbols tied to Los Verdes del Norte, a municipal facility in name, a cartel distribution hub in truth. Across the city, the second strike slammed into a West Philadelphia Community Renewal Center, a nonprofit that had posted photos of children's reading programs and neighborhood mentorship nights. What agents found inside was not a youth center. Behind the public rooms, beyond a false wall disguised as a storage closet, they uncovered 7 large safes, stacks of cash sorted by rubber band color, unregistered phones, a hidden server rack running encrypted traffic routing nodes. This wasn't charity, this was logistics. But the most dangerous fight erupted in a place no one expected, a municipal garage in South Philly used for city maintenance vehicles. The surveillance cameras caught it first, 3 figures sprinting through the narrow bay, shadows stretching across fuel-stained concrete. They weren't mechanics, they weren't inspectors, they were Hale's mid-level coordinators, people with city ID badges and cartel loyalty. They were armed and desperate. Federal units approached both garage doors simultaneously. The suspects bolted for the rear exit, the same exit they had used for months to slip out unnoticed during shipments. They had memorized every blind spot, every corner, every angle of the alley behind the building. But this time, the sky opened with a roar. A Black Hawk helicopter broke through the fog like a steel predator, its rotor wash hammering down against the corrugated roof. Dust blasted into spirals. Power lines trembled. The alley shook under the beating air. The suspects froze. Then came the voice from above, booming, amplified, absolute. "Drop your weapons. You are surrounded." They didn't drop anything. They opened fire. Bullets tore into the alleyway, ricocheting off dumpsters, fracturing brick, sparking against steel drainage pipes. The gunfire turned the narrow corridor into a violent tunnel of echo and flame. Agents moved low and controlled, steps measured, breaths steady. This wasn't chaos to them. This was muscle memory, training, years of raids and split-second calls. The suspects fired wildly. Agents responded precisely. For 9 relentless minutes, the alley became a battlefield. Smoke drifting, glass shattering, metal ringing as rounds struck steel. The helicopter's downwash whipped debris into a storm. Light flashed against wet pavement. Every sound carried the weight of a system ripping out its infected parts. And then, silence. Heavy, final, absolute. 3 suspects lay motionless. 2 more dropped their rifles, their hands trembling so violently they could hardly raise them. The escape route they trusted had been mapped days earlier. The alley they memorized was already a cage when they ran into it. By dawn, the numbers were staggering. 49 arrests, 820 kilograms of narcotics seized, 97 weapons recovered, dozens of encrypted devices, servers, coded ledgers, 14 cartel-linked facilities neutralized. News helicopters circled above the operations like vultures sensing a story too large to ignore. Philadelphia residents peered from windows, blankets clutched around their shoulders. Police cruisers flashed in every direction. Yellow tape shivered in the cold wind. But the shock wasn't from the raids themselves. It was from the truth the raids exposed. These facilities weren't hidden in abandoned warehouses or remote rural hideouts. They operated beside grocery stores, beside playgrounds, beside schools, beside homes. beside the very institutions meant to keep people safe. This wasn't a smuggling ring. This was an empire, a parasitic system living inside Philadelphia's infrastructure, disguised as normal life, protected by official access, insulated by legal authority. And Marcus Hale had been the beating heart inside it. But the night's raids were not the end. They were the incision. Because once the criminal network's external branches were severed, the next stage of the federal operation would strike even deeper, into the very institutions Hale had corrupted from within. The next targets wouldn't be warehouses. They would be officials. Inside the Philadelphia Federal Analysis Center, the air felt colder than the concrete walls that enclosed it. Rows of glowing screens cast pale reflections on the faces of agents, analysts, and forensic accountants studying the evidence laid out before them. It was all there in a silent, overwhelming sprawl. Ledgers, bank flows, hidden routing paths, encrypted message archives, shell company records, grant approvals, warehouse invoices, and financial diagrams that, once assembled, revealed a structure no one in the room had imagined possible. For the first time, the full economic skeleton of the network Marcus Hale had nurtured stood exposed, and it was larger, deeper, and more intricately woven into Philadelphia's civic fabric than any drug seizure or warehouse raid could ever show. The unraveling began with what seemed like routine community grants Hale had approved over several years. On paper, they were harmless, small sums directed to tutoring programs, building repairs, youth mentorship, safety initiatives. But when accountants followed the money past the first transfer point, the truth surfaced like a submerged wreck rising through dark water. The grants split instantly into multiple fragments, filtered through a chain of anonymous shell companies registered in Delaware, then funneled into 2 private casinos tucked discreetly across the state line in New Jersey. These casinos were not the neon-lit, chaotic halls known to tourists. They were invitation-only floors behind unmarked entrances, camera angles suspiciously low, carpeted silence swallowing the sound of cash being reshaped into something untraceable. Inside those quiet rooms, drug money became chips. Chips became digital credits. Credits became wire transfers. And wire transfers returned to Philadelphia as consulting income, procurement retainers, or community engagement stipends. Not bribery in the legal sense, not overt criminality, just the slow conversion of cartel profit into civic influence. That discovery was disturbing, but what investigators found next carried a darker weight. 3 private clinics, scattered across North and West Philadelphia, had long been praised by Hale for their service to underserved residents. Officially, they provided low-cost health screenings and basic care. Their storage rooms told a different story. Under fluorescent lights, agents found shelves packed with bulk supplement bottles, unlabeled pill casings, medical-grade sealers, and rolls of counterfeit prescription labels. The purchasing logs showed thousands of dollars spent on equipment with no connection to legitimate medical treatment. These clinics were not health centers at all. They were clean, quiet fronts where counterfeit medication was pressed, sealed, labeled, and moved through the city disguised as ordinary pharmaceuticals. The same pills carried into homes as trusted medicine were, in reality, vehicles for fentanyl or methamphetamine, produced under the cover of charitable health care. Yet nothing in the analysis room froze the air like the financial audit of Hale's most celebrated nonprofit program, the Philadelphia Renewal Initiative. For years, the city had applauded its youth mentorship events, scholarship drives, and neighborhood workshops. Its fundraising photos showed smiling children holding books and backpacks. Its bank records revealed something else entirely. In 4 years, the nonprofit collected nearly $12 million from donors who did not exist. The listed addresses were empty lots, abandoned row homes, demolished buildings. The donor names were digital fabrications generated by foreign software designed for synthetic identity creation. And the outgoing payments, disguised as campaign support, security consulting, or community partnership fees, flowed into the pockets of real officials, real intermediaries, real public servants whose loyalty had been quietly purchased through a chain of transactions that looked clean unless one inspected the source beneath the first layer. When investigators finally mapped the entire flow, clinics, casinos, grants, shell accounts, community programs, discretionary funds, they saw the pattern with painful clarity. The entire system depended on Marcus Hale, not as an opportunist, not as a desperate official lured into crime, but as an architect. Every corridor of the network, every laundering route, every disguised transfer relied on his signature, his access, his authority to move money under the cover of legitimacy. Remove him, and sections of the operation destabilized instantly. Push further, and entire financial routes buckled. For the first time, the empire showed thin points, fragile intersections held together by only a small number of insiders who believed their positions made them untouchable. The room shifted in mood as this reality crystallized. The objective was no longer to understand the infection, but to purge it. The warehouses and stash houses struck during the night raids were only the outer shell. What lay ahead were the internal pillars, offices, badges, pensions, desks, uniforms, and titles. The parts of the system Hale had corrupted from the inside. The next phase would not target buildings or storage sites. It would target the people who kept the organism alive. By dawn, Philadelphia stood suspended in a moment of uneasy quiet, the kind that settles after something enormous has cracked open, but before anyone can understand the scale of the damage. The raids had torn apart the external shell of Marcus Hale's network, but the evidence pouring into the federal command post revealed a deeper truth. The most dangerous part of the cartel's empire wasn't in its warehouses, clinics, or disguised distribution hubs. It lived inside the institutions that were supposed to protect the city. It lived in offices with flags, in hallways lined with framed mission statements, in desks where public trust had been turned into leverage. Federal teams began moving through the city with a different kind of force. No battering rams, no helicopters, no concussion charges. This stage required precision, silence, and a cold steadiness, the kind that frightens the guilty more than noise ever could. At the first precinct targeted, officers were standing in their morning briefing when the doors opened, and federal agents stepped in. No shouting, no drawn weapons, only warrants held firmly in gloved hands. A lieutenant with 20 years of service stared blankly as agents removed his badge and sidearm, the symbols he had built his identity around. A detective celebrated for reducing neighborhood drug crime lowered his eyes as his own handcuffs tightened around his wrists. At City Hall, a procurement official froze when agents slid open a filing cabinet and recovered envelopes of pre-counted community funds that were nothing more than disguised payouts from Hale's nonprofits. One by one, the internal pillars of the network collapsed. 17 police officers, 3 courthouse administrators, multiple clerks, drivers, contractors, and aides were taken into custody before noon. Some resisted in silence, some cried, some stared at the floor, already knowing the investigation had been building for months. Outside, small groups of residents gathered on sidewalks and balconies. There was no cheering, no celebration, only the stunned realization that the people poisoning their neighborhoods had not been nameless criminals in distant corners of the city. They had been the ones shaking hands at parades, leading safety workshops, wearing medals on their uniforms. When the governor addressed the state that afternoon, his voice held no dramatic rise, no political fury. It was heavy, plain, and tired, the voice of a man speaking over a foundation he now understood had been decaying beneath him for years. He announced the creation of a new, independent authority, the Bureau of Institutional Integrity of Pennsylvania, a body with full legal power to audit, seize, interrogate, and dismantle corruption inside any agency receiving public funds. No political appointments, no protected reputations. Its mandate, carved into its founding document, was simple and merciless. Restore trust where it had been stolen, rebuild institutions where they had been hollowed out, and prevent this kind of infiltration from ever rooting itself again. As evening settled over the city, the final evidence ledgers were logged. Seized badges were sealed into numbered bags, and the last corrupted officials were driven away from the buildings they had once commanded. Philadelphia found itself in a moment that was not triumph and not relief. Something heavier, something closer to reckoning. Because the truth behind the Hale case was never just about narcotics or hidden money or counterfeit medical supplies. It was about trust, the invisible contract between a city and the institutions meant to protect it. That trust had not been broken by strangers. It had been shattered from within. And yet, even with the arrests, the seizures, the exposure, the city did not collapse. It pushed back, through transparency, through accountability, through an uncompromising refusal to look away. Marcus Hale's network had thrived because it blended into ordinary life. Its strength had been belief in silence. But silence was gone now, replaced by a clarity the city could not unsee. Philadelphia understood that the danger had never been distant. It had been wearing suits, carrying badges, filing paperwork and signing forms. The question no longer was what Hale had done. That was clear. The question was what came next. Because corruption does not disappear in a single morning. Networks do not evaporate after one operation. Institutions do not heal overnight. But something had shifted permanently. A crack had opened, and the city had chosen not to look away from what was inside. And somewhere in the federal command post, a new map was already being prepared. Not of Philadelphia, of the next city, the next state, the next institution that believed itself immune, until the moment it discovers it never was.